Hello, and welcome to the Automation Insider. My name is Joe McGrath. I'm a systems development lead for Hy-Tek Intralogistics. I design a lot of buildings. I help a lot of folks figure out how to make things work better. A lot of times it's making what you have work as well as it can. And sometimes the answer to that is slotting. So what I've done is I found an expert in the field that works for a company that is an expert at slotting. So Iralyn, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me. I'm Iralyn with Slot3D. I am a business development manager, and I have been with Slot3D about 6 years now. And yeah, like Joe said, we are the experts at slotting, and we are empowering supply chain leaders to solve all of their slotting challenges and needs through our slotting optimization software.
All right, cool. So we've both said slotting maybe 20 times at this point, just in the intro. What is slotting?
Yeah, so to simplify it, slotting is the process of assigning every product within the warehouse a home, a place to live. So this is where that product would be picked from, replenished to, and potentially moved. But in terms of what is smart slotting, that's taking it to another level and ultimately trying to find the most effective way to place that product in the warehouse based on things like the demand of the product, the size of the product, and then your specific operational goals within that facility.
Okay. So let's go over some of the basic reasons why slotting matters. Like if I have 15 items and I know where they are because I'm a small warehouse, like is this something I should be concerned about?
Yeah, there's always room for improvement, even if it is a small warehouse. I mean, if you just think about sort of a really simple example, not in a warehouse, but like in your kitchen, where you place the items within your kitchen, it matters. It can disrupt the flow of you making your eggs. It can disrupt the flow of how you go to retrieve the spatula. If your spatulas are in the very top cabinet, obviously that's not efficient. And that's a really small example in a small space that we're thinking through there, but it ultimately can increase the time it takes you to make the eggs, slow down the process, and then ultimately create frustration or strain on your body because you're reaching for this, you're frustrated that you can't find the spatulas or the things that you really need to effectively make a delicious breakfast. So that's like kind of a silly example, but just when thinking through slotting and why it matters, I mean, at the end of the day, it's just putting product in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, well, I don't want anything to stand between me and breakfast. I've made that pretty clear, in the past. And I think that's an excellent example. Now, it's an awesome analogy, too, because I think oftentimes, let's say you have a building with 200,000 SKUs, it becomes pretty clear to everyone in that operation that we need to figure out what the slotting is, right? But even in a smaller building, there's a lot of labor to be saved by finding the right location, putting things in the golden zone, describing what a golden zone might even be. That's awesome. So what happens when you do it wrong? I think you talked about the spatula being in the wrong place, and that's a lot of work. But what about in a really large operation when slotting? What's indicative of bad slotting in a building?
Yeah, so I heard this example from a customer recently, and I think it really drives home the point, but you're not paying your forklift operators to drive, you're paying them to retrieve product. So one result of poor slotting is unnecessary travel. And ultimately, you're disrupting the flow and how quickly you can get product out of your operations because your order pickers or forklift operators are just traversing unnecessarily throughout the warehouse, throughout these distribution centers, and slowing down, creating this kind of bottleneck in certain areas or congestion in certain areas, decreasing the efficiency of how you're getting product out the door ultimately.
Yeah, so that kind of idea of non-value added travel, which is something we approach routinely with automation. A lot of ASRSs we design and build, the primary purpose is to reduce travel. And ideally, you could just move some things around. I'm oversimplifying the process, and you could have largely the same benefit, kind of depending on how aggressive you can get with that. So that's really cool. So if you're out there and you see a lot of your operators traveling way too much, maybe it's a tip to think about slotting. So how typically does a slotting effort impact an operation? Like what's the process sort of look like?
Yeah, so I think slotting in general touches a lot of aspects that maybe you don't really think about. So, yes, it affects the picking and replenishment activities, but it also can impact the safety of the operators within that facility. So, things that are a big consideration are weight of items, where we place those items. Maybe they have to be according to a certain operational sort of implementation. So we want all of the heavy mover or the heavy items on the bottom shelves. So that's something that kind of impacts safety. And that's one thing that would be addressed through safety. And then ultimately, it's impacting your customer satisfaction, because how quickly are we getting these products out the door? So it kind of touches a lot of aspects of the warehouse operations in general.
Okay. And before we jump into the process super deep, there's different kinds of slotting, different flavors, if you will. And I've heard a couple of words that are pretty common. I've used them, actually. So there's static slotting, and then there's dynamic slotting. What's the main differentiator between those two categories?
Yeah, so I think with static slotting, you're primarily giving one product a place and a home, and it's sort of fixed for whatever set amount of time. But then with dynamic slotting, that home is kind of ever changing. It's constantly rotating and adjusting. And it's also different in operations how some customers or some clients kind of address and implement static slotting versus dynamic slotting. I think static slotting can still be quote unquote dynamic. It just changes more frequently, but you're giving that product a home for that set amount of time, and kind of establishing and allowing the operators to kind of effectively find that home too. So there's some value too in just static. I think sometimes static has like a negative connotation to it, because it doesn't seem like it's continuously improving, but I believe it still can have that impact and benefit through static slotting. And then dynamic slotting is kind of a whole other beast and a whole other layer of added complexity. When you add in, there's multiple homes that are always changing for the products. So.
Yeah. But I always thought that one of the main benefits of static slotting is that it is super approachable. Like you can figure out where this needs to go and you can put it there. And, depending on the amount of SKUs you have and what data you have available to you, like that seems like something that you could do versus just letting stuff go wherever. So it's definitely like an entry level like thing. And sometimes it gets you almost all the way there. I like to say that perfection is sometimes the enemy of good.
Yeah, I like that.
Great example of that. You can do pretty good if you're kind of clever about it. Let's chew on how do you slot something? Like how do you decide where the stuff goes? Like what's a way to do that? Now we're going to talk about using software later on, because I suspect that your answer will hint at a whole lot of really complex things we have to do. But what's the general process?
Yeah, I think the general process is looking at your SKUs, understanding the dimensions or the size of that product, and then finding an appropriate sized home for that product. I mean, that's kind of the very base layer is, does this item even fit in this location? And then the next step of that would be considering things like the demand of that product. So how fast is this product moving out of the facility? So determining some sort of velocity around those items, which could be through your historical data or forecast data that you have available to you. So taking those considerations, and then any business rules that you have in your warehouse, like we mentioned, weight. So does that impact where items are slotted, what kind of home they get?
Freezer or refrigerated, I think, is a really common one.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was about to go was, freezer and refrigerator, do you have certain kind of restrictions around where those products have to be slotted in the facilities?
Yeah. I've seen like meat can't go above vegetables. I've seen some fire suppression rules that are pretty they're very serious for great reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely want to take into consideration, like, where are the explosives going within the facility too. We have some customers who, yeah, we have a group of SKUs and they belong to flammable or explosives or high security. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of buildings I've worked in have an aerosol room, and there's always some guy that calls it the boom boom room. I'm like, man, I understand why you call it that. Let's go ahead and shut the door.
That's funny.
So I think one of the first things you said, and this is the one that I think catches a lot of folks when they first try to do it, is make sure stuff fits. And if you're just looking at dimensions, there's a couple of ways that you can see if something fits. So there's like liquid cube, which length, width, height multiplied together, and is that smaller than the place you're going to put it? That's cool, but that's dangerous. I don't know if you want to poke on why there might be a better way to think about how to do that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of low hanging fruit. Like, that's a good step in the right direction. But ultimately, yes, when you have the ability to orient things and fit the most amount that you can in a certain product location, by changing how that SKU or that product fits in there, I mean, that's kind of opening up a world of possibilities and allowing for even more space utilization. And I think the liquid cube is a really great step, but you can take it even further with actual product dimensions too.
Yeah, I'll always find somebody that's like, yeah, well, I think it fits because it's less cube. I'm like, it's cool. So I'll check, and I do a lot of. I'm a little bad about Excel engineering, right? Because it's an available tool, and you can do critical dim checks. And so, like, well, it's too long for the location. Okay, that's discounted immediately. But there's another level of like check, and sometimes you have to use a little bit of software and or an algorithm to figure out, like, well, I can put 3 of them horizontally and 2 of them kind of vertically, and that is really, really difficult to do, in the Excel world. So if you're managing that in kind of a spreadsheet basis, that's going to be a tough one to work out. There's a lot of permutations, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of, when you start to get into slotting, I think as a whole, it seems pretty straightforward, but then things like you just described, or okay, that's layer 1 and we have to add on all these other layers. That's where it starts to get into the, okay, I think I could do it, but then it becomes like too much of a lift, or it seems too daunting to actually implement and execute slotting because you start adding in all these layers of complexity and considerations to how we are actually going to slot everything.
Yeah, and I think one more, like, the one that people actually think that they're doing, which is kind of hard, is what, let's say everything is the same zone, right? There's no flammables. It's all just nuts and bolts, or whatever. How do you decide which item gets that really premier face and which one goes in which aisle? I think there's this idea of like economic slotting models. Some of them are just minimum travel, which can kind of equate to that. Or like, what's kind of your general approach to deciding what goes where?
Yeah, so I think in general, a lot of people think that it's just putting your fastest movers towards the front. And I think that's fair. But I do think that there's value and nuance to slotting when it comes to, okay, let's factor in more than just that. Because, and with slotting in general, when you're approaching it, maybe right now these are your fast movers, but tomorrow they might not be, or the next day. So if you have the ability to kind of zoom out and take a glance at what's happening on your operations as a whole, that kind of empowers and allows you to make more data-driven and more informed decisions within the slotting plans that you're developing as well.
Yeah, this podcast actually might just be me listing a whole bunch of mistakes I've made and then you telling folks why. So this whole idea of like, well, let's just put fast movers up close to the conveyor or up, up in the front aisle. There's this thing you can do called overslotting, and it sounds like a myth, and it is absolutely not. And I've done this with air fresheners like one time, which is crazy to think about. But you put all your fast movers together, and then the consequence is everybody goes to that location, and then you can have 40 walkies, and everybody's just hanging out waiting for this perfectly slotted aisle, right? And how do you not overslot? What are some things that you need to consider to avoid that particular situation?
Yeah, so I think, and this is kind of where we're towing the line of manual slotting versus slotting software and having the visibility. So you can actually see, okay, where are my fast movers? Oh, I can clearly see. Here's a big kind of glaring red flag, like all of these fast moving products are in this one area. I think that's going to signal a bunch of people congregating there. So I think having the visibility is really powerful in slotting to identify where some of those bottlenecks or congestion can occur. And then maybe let's do some workload balancing and balance out those aisles and kind of spread it throughout just a little bit so that we're not having those points of contention within the slotting.
Okay. Yeah. This is definitely the rookie mistake. I 100% did it. It was pretty glorious for about a day. Okay. So there's another idea that's pretty pervasive in slotting, and I find this one to be tricky without doing a lot of analysis. And so this is kind of hard, but this idea of skew affinity. So like I think that these things get ordered together, and it has nothing to do with the item dimensions. It's order co-location, right? So I think if you're going to buy a brake rotor, you're probably going to buy pads, right? Like the odds are higher. And so you would get those two things together. So how do you search for that, or how do you find that? And then what do you do if you know that there's affinity, or you think maybe there's affinity?
Yeah, so I've heard that concept called basket analysis or just affinity analysis. And I think it's really interesting how you can take an order and kind of take that analysis and understand, okay, these items are typically ordered together. So it would make the most sense just to put those items at least in the same aisle or close to each other, and create some sort of affinity grouping within your slotting plans or slotting strategies so that you are reducing the order pickers travel. They don't have to go from aisle 1 to aisle 20 just to get the 3 things that are always pretty much ordered together. Like a typical example being a grocery. Okay, you're going in for bread, milk, and eggs. Like that's standard. We don't want all of those things so spread out. How can we try to reduce the footprint of where those items are stored within the facility to eliminate some of those?
That extra travel, yeah. All right. And before we jump into how software can help us facilitate this, when do you probably don't need to stress about slotting? Like, are there any examples you can think of? I know that sometimes we'll build certain types of automation where like the way it puts things away and brings them back. Like Exotek's a great example. Like the way it puts it away is going to preclude you from needing to slot, and this kind of answers all the travel problems with automation. But are there any other like worlds where you think slotting is like probably not a super big concern, or like don't focus on this necessarily day one?
I think even if you're not doing it to like such detailed levels, I think slotting still is valuable, just like the concept in general. I'm trying to think of an example where I would say, I mean, obviously if you only have a few SKUs, like you only have a few SKUs, like you don't really need that. But I just think it is valuable in general, even with, I mean, going back to like the kitchen example, it does matter where you put things, and it can kind of disrupt the flow of things if those items or those products aren't where they should be. So maybe that's kind of me taking it out on that question, but I don't really have like a really good answer, honestly.
Well, I think that that's actually probably one of the most telling things. So there's a lot of technologies that we put in place, and we are always looking for like, when should I use this, and when is this not a great fit? But I think, and I was baiting you a little bit. Like typically, you should look at slotting. Like it's overwhelmingly one, not very difficult if it doesn't have to be, and two, like there's almost always some kind of payback. There's this idea of like a trash conveyor, right? It seems like silly low hanging fruit, and it always has a return on investment. Like every time I've looked at it, right? And slotting is the same way. Like it generally is some level of improvement with almost no investment or like minimal investment, and it's like a home run. Everybody's safer at the end of the day. It's less work. Yeah, it like maybe if there's 2 items, like that's just location A and B. I've never gotten to work in an operation like that. It sounds awesome. Yeah. Okay. So now we've established what slotting is. We know that we should probably look at it, right? What kind of software is out there, and how can that help us facilitate this process of deciding where things go, in real time, and making the best locating decisions?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different slotting software out there, and I think really what the overall slotting community is trying to do is reduce the lift that's on the engineering teams or those supply chain leaders and individuals who are creating their slotting plans kind of manually, taking that lift off of them. And with slotting software, ultimately what you're trying to do is to reduce that manual effort that's involved and create a repeatable, kind of standardized approach to slotting. And I think that can be, within one facility where you're kind of eliminating that tribal knowledge that's required, or it's maybe when you're looking at a network of multiple DCs, multiple facilities, you're kind of standardizing the approach to slotting that way as well. So I think ultimately what we're trying to do is make the engineering team's lives easier when creating the slotting plans, and then ultimately the operation teams making it make sense. So whenever those people are out on the floor, they're like, yeah, that makes sense for that product to be located there. Not, why would the engineering team put this product here? That makes no sense. So somehow you have to connect the theoretical with the actual and the reality of what's happening out on the floor.
So Slot Theory makes an excellent product. You can input data and figure out, hey, this is a really good place to put everything. And you can do some, I think there's something to be said for some guess and check and adjustment of that algorithm too, right? Like you run it for a month and you're like, yeah, I would tweak these 3 things, tweak them, and you hit it. One thing that always becomes like a conversation after you've made a good slotting plan is like, okay, how do we get all the stuff to these places? If I'm taking stuff all over the building, like that could be a ton of labor. Do you guys ever do any move planning as part of that effort?
Yeah. So now cue where I can talk about Slot 3D. So yeah, with Slot 3D, we have a reslot moves report, which is actually the implementation of the slotting plan that's developed. So what we're able to do is create move sets, which would tell you, hey, here's the product, where it's currently located, down to the details of the physical address of that location. So, we're taking this product A out of location 1, moving it here, and then giving that product a new home. So it follows a daisy chain. Everything gets a new home. Nothing's left out on the warehouse floor. And that allows your operation teams to not only execute the moves, but within that report, there's economics tied to each of those moves. So you see clearly the justification for the move, which is something that, money is a universal language. Everything in Slot 3D boils down to dollars and cents. So it makes a lot of sense to everybody. Obviously, we would make that move, look at the savings we can realize by doing so. So that's kind of how the implementable part or the action part of Slot 3D.
Do you find that a lot of folks try to exercise that, or there's this other way to do it, slotting through attrition? So you just wait till the location winds down, and then you dump the new SKU in there. What % of customers try to do an actual move plan and force all the slots to be correct as fast as possible versus we'll just kind of wait it out and let it work itself through?
Yeah, I think when I'm introduced to a lot of these slotting operations or lack thereof, it's just slotting kind of becomes like an afterthought. It's not really a main priority. It goes to the back burner. So it's like what you're saying. Okay, we'll wait till the perfect time. I don't think there really ever is a perfect time. So you might as well make these small adjustments here and there to realize a great amount of savings. I mean, it just kind of makes sense to, okay, we have this resource maybe for an hour. How much can we get done? How much can we actually move within this hour? Maybe it is that low hanging fruit. It's the highest savings on that list, but it's kind of gradually growing and kind of going up that mountain towards optimization, just continuously making those improvements to get there.
So okay, so this is a place in between a lot of the efforts I've done. Either it's like we'll just do it through attrition, we'll change the slots and let it work it out, and that could take 6 months, or there's like the big rush to move everything. But you're saying like you got an hour or two a day. Let's make the most valuable moves, like literally the most financially valuable moves, and then tomorrow get back on it, and eventually you'll get through it, but you'll have probably achieved most of your return on investment like pretty early on in that move process.
Yeah. And also with that, if you're also refreshing the data, you're not going back to like an old slotting plan. You're continuously working towards something that's also moving in parallel to how your operations are.
So every day when you look at the best moves, it's a new set of the best moves based on what happened in the past.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, I think it's a cool approach. Just think of the small wins. I think even just in like your personal life and your day to day, if you just think of how you move and operate through the world and apply that to slotting, I mean, just keep taking those little small wins that get you to the end goal. I think that's something that I'll always like to have in mind is what is the end goal and how can we get there as quickly as possible? I think it's through those small wins. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. All right. And then let's talk about like, what's the future of slotting? Because this is a kind of a quite like putting things in the right place is what slotting is. We've had software for a while and some excellent companies. Slot 3D is like the one that always comes to mind, like that help you do that in an amazing way. But what's next?
Yeah, so I think that we're in a really interesting time when it comes to like the conversation of AI, which is something I wouldn't even say that's the future. I'd say that's like where we're at today. And in Slot 3D operations, we actually are introducing AI and utilizing our experience, our 23, 24 years of being around through machine learning to actually say, okay, we're taking all of this data and all of this information from previous customers and databases and models that have been built with Slot 3D. How can we take your data, this kind of snapshot in time, kind of run that through this AI insights and give you recommendations and propose little tweaks here and there within your operations that are going to ultimately reduce your costs and slot more SKUs within your facilities. So I think we're there today and we're always innovating and trying to kind of be on that cutting edge of technology. So with AI, that's something that's really interesting. It really fits the slotting problem and it can be directly applied to it. So that's one of the big things that I'm seeing and kind of the future of slotting.
Okay. And then as far as like integrations with other software packages, where do you see this fitting? And like is the role of like a Slot 3D or that type of software going to grow over time?
Yeah. So, I mean, today with slotting, you have to have the data from those existing systems to power the slotting plans that you're generating. And then ultimately, it's going to be crucial that you are able to feed the data or the ultimate product recommendations back into those systems. So we've understood that that's a main driver for customers. Okay, we love the plan. How do we execute it and get it back to our system? So we actually have developed API connections that allow those two systems to communicate. And I think that's something that's really crucial to actually, you can have that plan or that product in place, but if you're not actually executing it, you're never going to get to that end goal. So it's really important that they can communicate.
Is that typically every time I've done it, it's been like tied directly to the WMS level? Is that pretty typical?
Yeah. So getting the information out of the WMS and then getting it back to it.
Do you ever interface with any other systems, like maybe, I don't know, like a bank of like mini load cranes? Like, would you ever interface directly with those and say, hey, put these things in these locations? Or is it pretty much a WMS connection like every time?
Yeah, it's pretty much a WMS connection, at least in my experience that I've seen. But that's not to say, I mean, the world is your oyster. Hopefully we can connect to all of the systems. And I think one thing to note too with Slot 3D is we are open to feedback, and we are open to like our customers giving us ideas. We love working and in collaborating with our customers. What do you need and how can we solve that problem? Ultimately, that's what we're trying to do, is solve your problem. So if you tell us what you need, I'm pretty sure our developers are going to be able to get there. It's just a matter of getting that information in front of them. So I think, like I said, yeah, the world's your oyster with it.
I do like oysters. No. Awesome. Do you have any closing words or anything else you wanted to put in stone about slotting?
Yeah, I think everyone should at least think about slotting. It doesn't hurt you to at least think about it. And if you find yourself being curious about it, you can reach out to me, the Slot 3D team. We'd love to have you follow our social channels. So we're on LinkedIn. And then, yeah, I love to talk about slotting, and my LinkedIn DMs are open too. So if you ever want to chat about it or hop on a call, I'm open. And yeah, I just really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, Joe. And it sounds like you have a lot of experience too with slotting, and it's cool to just hear kind of some of the frequent pain points and how, what you've experienced is
decades of mistakes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And for everybody that followed along, thank you very much for tuning into this episode of the Automation Insider, and follow us anywhere that you download podcasts or check us out on YouTube. Thank you very much.